You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network. For more quality options programs, visit www.theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app, available in iTunes and on Google Play. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.
Thank you. I'm very privileged to introduce our next panel. Please welcome Robert Castrignano, principal and partner at Sandler O'Neill, and Mr. Anthony Scaramucci, American financier, entrepreneur, and political consultant. He's the founder of Skybridge Capital and founder of the Skybridge Alternative Conference, or SALT, which will be presented next week in Las Vegas. And I pass it off to you, Coach. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
We could go a little higher than that. Come on, what are we doing? Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So before we start, I wanted to take a moment to say thank you to OIC and our co-host MIAX for a great 3 days worth of events, and really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Given that, Anthony, and given the last 2 years, I thought I'd start with a conversation that actually you and I had almost 2 years ago till today, where we talked about the 4 issues that we thought were going to affect the presidential election of 2016, which were taxes, energy, immigration, and healthcare. So if you look with the benefit of hindsight, where do you think we are today on those 4 issues?
Okay, so Bob obviously worked on the campaign with me and had one of these very fun conversations with Stephen Miller. Remember your conversation with Stephen Miller? So
I do.
I brought Bob. Now, you guys were here at the Trump Doral, so this explains everything you need to know about our campaign. On the 5th floor, we had the campaign headquarters and the studio. And you go up the back steps, and then all of a sudden you're on the 14th floor. So in Trump Tower, you go from the 5th floor up 1 flight of steps to the 14th floor. That's everything you need to know about Trump and the election, okay? So, but I brought Bob in because one of the things that we believe, having studied this, is that the deficit is totally manageable by the United States if we switch our policies. And so we're living in Saudi America. We didn't understand that in the mid-'80s. When I was in college, a professor told me, you have peak oil theory, we're going to run out of oil by 2010. Oil is going to be $2,000 a barrel, but oftentimes in our lives, we think linearly and the world is moving exponentially. And so Bethany McLean, who wrote the book Saudi America, says the knowable reserves, U.S. knowable reserves, are about $40 trillion priced at today's price per barrel. But she believes that there's over $100 trillion worth of oil in the United States, and 65% of that, ladies and gentlemen, is under land that's owned by the U.S. government. And so if you just step back, you've got about a $60 trillion natural resource that the government owns versus a $22 trillion deficit. So the one big problem here, and Bobby knows this, the Department of Energy is really the Department of Nuclear Energy. And so if Governor Perry was here right now, he would explain to you that they never really expanded their mandate into petroleum and other things. When they were put together, everybody thought we were going to run out of oil and fossil fuels, so they moved there. So on the energy side, we are nowhere where we need to be. We need the right policies in place, and there's a way to burn it a lot cleaner today than in years past. But we could right-size that deficit. It would take us 15 years to right-size that deficit and reposition America again where it deserves to be. The global leader and economic superpower for the next 100 to 150 years. On healthcare, sort of the same issue. Just remember this about your life. You're going through your life thinking about it linearly, but the world's happening exponentially. So does anybody remember the British economist Tom Malthus? Okay, so he was born in the 1830s, And Bobby's older than me. That was a good year for you, wasn't that, Bobby? That had to be a good year for you, right? But I know you know George Washington and everything, but like Tom Malthus in 1843, he wrote an economic treatise, and what did he say? He said, we got a huge problem. We are going to starve. The population of the world is growing exponentially, but we're only able to grow the food linearly. And so we're gonna starve ourselves. And so again, what ends up happening is people think linearly, but the world's moving exponentially. And of course, with the technological improvements in food management, you have more people dying from obesity-related illnesses in the world than from starvation. And so again, with healthcare, we have completely blown the healthcare situation. It is a failure of American policy. It's a bipartisan indictment and failure of American policy. If you're a Democrat in the room and you're sore at me for telling you that Obamacare is by and large a failure, it is. And if you're a Republican in the room and you're sore at me for saying that you tried to repeal and replace it for 80 times, and then when President Trump won, you couldn't get it done. And listen, I was only in the White House for 11 days, but they were 11 memorable days for me. Okay? And by the way, if you say 10, you're going to hurt my feelings because it's like jipping me out of like 9% of my career, right? But and obviously, all these days are memorable. So the first day was a Friday. I was there for 2 Fridays, so I remember every day, right? And I'm sitting there with the president, and he's talking about the healthcare situation. He literally looks at me. I mean, that was a memorable day, right? Because he's announcing I'm going to be the comms director. Spicer's quitting, and Trump looks at me and goes, okay, that's one down. He wouldn't have to do anything about that, right? And I was working on the other guys. Of course, my suicide vest went off at the same time as some of those guys. But that's fine. We can talk about that in a second. But what he says to me is that they repealed and replaced it 80 times. And he says, Mooch, it's like the dog chasing the car. The dog's barking at the car. He talks about himself in the third person, in case you didn't know. I'm here to provide insight, right? So you didn't know that. So he says, now Trump comes along and wins the election, and now we're in the position to repeal and replace Obamacare, and they can't get it done. They can't put the coalition together. So that's a big failure. If you were in the transition with me and you were talking to Stephen Mnuchin and others, we wanted the president to focus on education and infrastructure. The establishment Republicans wanted him to focus on health care. They said he would save $1 trillion and he could roll that into tax reform. Right. But we said to him, go take a couple of baby steps. I know you're a big thinker, but boy, this will be very exciting. If you get a bipartisan deal done on education, and we have a very uneven, unfortunately, K-12 educational system in the United States. It's really damaging the country. And then the second thing you could do is we could talk about infrastructure. We got to rebuild these crumbling bridges, roads, tunnels, airports, et cetera. But Paul Ryan and Reince Priebus convinced him to go in the healthcare direction. So we're nowhere on healthcare. And then what you learn when you get into the government, the concrete has already set on Obamacare. But the reason why I bring up Thomas Malthus, the very good news for the world, is that the predictions are not going to be true. You're not going to have 35% of our GDP tied to an aging population and all that apocalyptic visions, because what's happening is we are advancing so quickly in terms of our technological prowess in medicine that the per capita delivery of medical health care is going to go down over the next 20 to 30 years. And so everybody in this room knows that the age of chemotherapy has been very painful for ourselves and for our loved ones, but we are now transitioning into the age of immunotherapy, and I'll just talk about my mom for a second. She has a form of leukemia that she would not have survived 20 short years ago, but they have advances now. They unpacked her genome, and they're now delivering her a medicine that is allowing her a very good quality of life. She gets tired once in a while, but it doesn't have the traditional side effects of chemotherapy. And so, and she's 82, she's got a lot of spunk in her still, and she will likely not die from the chemotherapy, thank God. It's a chronic disease now that can be managed. So this is very, very positive healthcare. So we talked about energy, we talked about taxation. So the taxation, in my opinion, again, this is my personal opinion, the president did a very good job in the common sense understanding of what we needed to do to reform the tax code to improve the competitive incentives for businesses, U.S. businesses and international businesses, to put their assets here in the U.S. and to invest capital in the U.S. and improve the capital investment dynamic of the United States. However, the SALT issue is crippling some of the larger states. And the other issue is about 68, 70% of the people that have actually done their tax returns have said, wait a minute, didn't really get that much money back in my taxes, or if anything, I'm in a blue state and I'm paying more in taxes. So that's a little bit of an issue. He was talking about, prior to the midterms, having a phase 2 where he would provide a middle-class tax cut. But there's no way you can get that done in that Congress. I don't know if you saw what Mulvaney said last week, but he said he would rather have root canal or a kidney stone than be in a meeting with Chuck and Nancy. He said, I just would rather have root canal or a kidney stone. So these people are going after each other viciously at a time where we need them not to, at a time where we need a real industrial policy plan, an infrastructure plan, a tax plan, a right-sizing plan of our entitlements. We need to repurpose and redesign our educational system. But these guys want to go after each other on cable news, and they want to have a kabuki theater related to every issue that comes up. And by the way, this is an indictment of both parties, not one. If Secretary Clinton had won that election, the Republicans would be having investigation after investigation on her emails, her foundation, her taxes, her this or that. They'd be driving her crazy too and distracting her into a state of insanity like they've done to Trump. And you know, I was on the campaign. I was only in the White House for 11 days, but I was on the campaign for a year, and I was on the president's transition team for 12 weeks, and I didn't see any collusion. And the president can't even collude with his own staff. I mean, how is he going to collude with the Russians, right? I mean, you guys know that. I mean, it's ridiculous. So, and now we're talking about obstruction, and so you don't have a crime. And so Alan Dershowitz, who was a law school professor of mine 30 plus years ago, has pointed out brilliantly and analytically precise that if you don't have the crime, there is a statute that says even if there wasn't a crime, if you tried to obstruct justice, you could be guilty of it. But the threshold standard without the crime is way higher than if the actual crime got committed. And if you read the Mueller report, which is actually, if you like politics, actually very interesting. I'm on like 206, I'm on page 260. And it's actually not even boring. It's actually very interesting. They give you a whole tick-tock of what happened. And I know all the personalities, so I'm giggling to myself. I'm like, Trump definitely said that. And as I'm turning to page, oh, he definitely said that, okay? And so what you learn is he's pissed off. And he's angry at the fact that there was absolutely no collusion. And so he's upset with the whole situation. And, you know, if you're a Democrat, you're upset with me, stop the nonsense, okay? You know, Attorney General Barr is a 45-year veteran of D.C. And the last point I'll make on this is Rod Rosenstein and I were classmates in school. We were in the same section. And I told the president, stop listening to the right-wing lunatics, too. You know, Rod Rosenstein is a Boy Scout. I know that guy for 33 years. And so last Easter Sunday, I got a call from the president, not this past one, but last Easter. He's like, okay, you're right. I finally figured out that Rod Rosenstein is not a bad guy. And he isn't. And so the thing actually unfolded more or less the way it should have. And so that's a good sign for the rule of law. But I just want to finish on this one last point. It's a very bad sign for the country. We have no 25-year plan for anything, okay? The Chinese, they view a 25-year period of time as short-termism. They have a 50 and 100-year plan. You live there, you know that. If you guys don't believe me, go Google China's Plan 2049. That is the anniversary of their revolution with Chairman Mao, and they are on plan. They're on plan on infrastructure. They're on plan on urban planning. They're on plan in migration from agrarian communities into urban communities to get their GDP numbers up. Now, they're destroying their environment, and we can still stay competitively way ahead of them if we get the right policies. But we have a 2-minute plan. So, and we got to fix that, and so, you know, we have to fix that.
Given the 2-minute plan, on Tuesday, there was an attempt, at least, at a discussion on infrastructure. And it started at $200 billion whenever, and now it's $2 trillion. One of the things that I've thought about was, if I look back at the TARP program, how the government used banks to lever equity money. And we've talked about before the possibility of a private-public infrastructure bank. So you could take whatever money, and then you could lever it 5 to 1 or 10 to 1, and all of a sudden you got a significant amount of money. What's your view there?
So, Bobby actually worked on this, so I give Bobby a lot of credit on this. When we won, we went to the president with an infrastructure plan that we were going to incorporate it into the tax code. It ultimately derived into the opportunity zone situation because they're basically both off of the same genetic code. So what was the infrastructure idea? It was to go to the American corporations that have several $1 trillion of unrepatriated capital offshore. There's a 9% difference in taxation. So they leave it offshore and they let it compound offshore as opposed to bringing it back home to the United States. $1.5 trillion of repatriated capital would boost the U.S. economy. It would add probably 75 to 80 basis points of GDP over 5 years. And so what we wanted to do was we wanted to go to corporations and say, tell you what, we're going to give you a 10-year abatement. You put the money back in the United States, chip off a piece of the money that you're holding offshore, but you got to put it in a U.S. infrastructure bank. And we actually had the XM Bank set up to do this for us. And what we would have done was we would have said the first $500 billion that comes back to the U.S. on the $4 trillion, you'll have a 10-year tax abatement. At the end of that year 10, we'll give you the money back, and you won't have to pay any taxes on it. But over that 10-year period of time, we could take that $500 billion, Bob, lever it 10 to 1, have $5 trillion, which is what you really need. That's the number. It's not $2 trillion. And now you've created an off-balance sheet situation. It doesn't affect the budget. And then you need to hire somebody that's effectively a Chairman Ben Bernanke or a Jerome Powell or a Janet Yellen to be the chair of the infrastructure bank. Because the biggest problem with infrastructure is how the math works. And let me give you the Obama stimulus. If I turn to the governor of XYZ state, I'm the president, I say, okay, great, I just got $1 trillion stimulus passed. Bobby, you're the governor. I'm going to give you $50 billion, or whatever number it is, $2 billion to your state to fix your roads. What happens is that governor already has a budget for those roads. And so what he does is he removes that budget, he puts the federal money in there, and he puts that into other projects, pet projects, certainly to favor his special interest groups and who's ever helping him get reelected. And so what happened with the Obama stimulus is that it ended up being infrastructure neutral from a point of view of implementation of policy. So people say, well, what happened? What happened was you gave the control to the governor. The governor took the money and he put it into other things. But, oh, yes, it went into infrastructure, but the stuff he had earmarked already for infrastructure went elsewhere. So you need somebody, a group of people, a commission. If you're putting the $2 trillion into the system, it's not going to come from the federal government. It has to be block granted to states or wherever you're sending it. You have to have mechanisms in place and incentives in place to make sure that creates a positive externality of infrastructure.
So going back to your comment before about Mulvaney, if you really wanted to get something done in infrastructure, and given your 10 days, not 11,
he's my old boss, so he's trying to jab me because I called him 150 years old. It didn't work, Bob. Keep going.
I'm just curious. Are there voices on both sides of the aisle that are more tolerant of one another and where you could get something done? Because theoretically, infrastructure should be easy. Everybody wants better airports, doesn't want to wait online. We've got a 100-year-old FAA.
Okay, they don't, though. So this is, unfortunately, the real truth. And so, I got an 11-day PhD on how these people operate. Okay, so let me give you like 2 minutes on how they operate. They had a deal with Trump on DACA, and they had a dreamer's deal. And he wanted a border wall, and he was ready to cede on the 10 or 11, 12 million people that are living here illegally. He was going to create a path to citizenship for them. They'd have to get to the back of the line and pay some user fees and stuff like that, but he was ready to cut that deal. And that scared the lights out of these guys. And so what they did was they ran out of the White House. They went to the West Wing lobby where the microphones are right outside the door. And they said, he just said S-hole countries. Heard him in the Roosevelt room. He used the word S-hole. He's a racist. And the whole thing stopped. Now, why'd they do that? They did that because they wanted to win the midterms. So they didn't want to solve the problem. They wanted to reclaim their power. And they knew if they cut a deal with him prior to the midterms, that was going to kill them. Because then what were they going to say to their people? Well, he gave us the Dreamer deal. He wanted the border security. There was the compromise. So from a political shrewdness and strategic point of view, Bob, they did the right thing. They won the House back.
Right.
But they did the wrong thing for the American people. So where we are now is we are left and right, and we're leaning very hard left and right, as opposed to like coming up with right or wrong policies for America. And so Trump's in a tough spot. So if you talk to him privately, he's like, yeah, of course I want to cut these deals, but these people are animals in this room. He said to Leslie Stahl, I was laughing, because I've told people, what was it like your 11 days? I said, well, we got tough people on Wall Street or in the options market or Miami. I said, I want you to imagine the worst person that you've met in your life. You got the worst person that you met in your life? That's the best person in Washington, okay? That is the vicar. That is the vicar of the morality of Washington, okay? And so Trump said to Leslie Stahl a few weeks ago, I was laughing, he said, I thought the real estate guys were like tough in New York. He goes, they're a bunch of babies. He used a different word than that, but they're a bunch of babies compared to these people in Washington. So there's only one way to fix it, okay? You need to shine a light on it, and you need to make as many Americans aware of it. They know, but they don't understand how really bad it is. They know because Trump's president. They know because 62.8 million people voted an orange human wrecking ball, okay, to come into that facility and to knock it over. I mean, they know it, all right? So, and they know that there's a very big problem in the country because there's an economic divide now. There's economic anxiety. And so I'm watching the clock, but I got time for 2 minute quick. Okay, so
go ahead.
I want to set the scene for you guys, okay? And I'm gonna tell you something that doesn't reflect well on me, but I think it's important to share it with you. So I grew up in a blue-collar family, blue-collar neighborhood. Bobby's met my dad. He worked 42 years for the same construction company. He was a heavy crane operator and a payload operator. Great guy, still alive, thank God. Worked super hard. We had a great middle-class upbringing. If you grew up on Long Island, we were in like one of those Levittown sort of houses, and we were in a neighborhood, and so, Mrs. Mealy could hit me as much as Mrs. Scaramucci. It was that sort of a place, right? I was getting hit by everybody in that neighborhood, right? And it was a great place to grow up, and we had a very good public school system. So my parents told me, go to school, and then you're gonna live the American dream. And so I grew up in this aspirational blue-collar family. My parents really believed that, and I bought it, and I went to Tufts and Harvard. My mother, and Bobby can verify this, my mother thought it was Hartford Law School, okay? Can you imagine? I'm calling her, telling her I got into Harvard. She's like, is that Hartford Law School? I said, no, Ma, it's Harvard. Well, why do they call it Hartford then? No, Ma, it's Harvard. Well, where is the school? It's in Hartford? No, it's in Boston. Well, why would they call it Hartford Law School if it's in Boston? You can't imagine the conversation, but if you're Italian, you know what I'm saying is like 100% true, right? So then I go from there to Goldman, and I go to all these other places, and I start to make some money, and I start to, get some escape velocity and have some level of financial independence. And it crippled me in the following way. I started to tunnel into the confirmed biases of my peer group. So I'm hanging out with hedge fund managers or Wall Street people or people at a country club or a golf course. I really started to miss, it's painful for me to say this to you because I shouldn't have missed this, but I started to miss what was going on in the country. And what was going on in the country is that aspirational working class family that I just described to you, in 35 short years, became desperational. So we went from aspirational working class families to desperational ones. Bam, I'm on the Trump campaign now. I work for Jeb. I adore Jeb. I think he's an unbelievable human being. And I know he spoke here. I know he's on Tom's board. So I left Jeb's campaign because Jeff obviously came out of the campaign. I joined candidate Trump's campaign. We're in Albuquerque, New Mexico, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm watching the people fill the Albuquerque Civic Center. There's 9,000 of them. The fire marshal says no more. There's 6,000 people waiting outside the Civic Center with these two big flat screens. And so the Secret Service is handing out these day pins. I don't know if you ever travel with the president, but they put a pin on you. And I'm like, what the hell is that? These guys said, well, if the shooting starts, we see the pin, we don't shoot at you. I'm going like this with the pin. I'm like, right? So now I'm looking at the crowd, and I'm an intellectually curious person. I take the pin off, put it in my pocket. I cross the security perimeter, and I go into the crowd. And I start talking to the people about, why are you here? What are you guys doing here? I'm going to give you guys a composite. This one guy said to me, I lost my job. I was at this factory for 12 years. My dad was there for 30. Factory moved to Mexico. So I lost my job. I'm now hustling at Lowe's, the home improvement center. I'm delivering pizza at Domino's. My wife's working as a dental assistant. We really cannot make ends meet. And Mr. Trump says he's going to bring the jobs back. That's why I'm here. Oh, by the way, Anthony, you know the joke in New Mexico? I said, no, sir. What's the joke in New Mexico? Oh, this is not New Mexico. New Mexico? Oh, that would be Mexico. Okay, because that's where all the jobs are going, right? And you guys are students of finance and economic history. We lost 65,000 factories since the signing of NAFTA. And we hollowed out these communities. And so for me, it was like an awakening for me. It was like an epiphany. And so I got back on the president's plane, or then the candidate's plane. We're flying now to Los Angeles to have a fundraiser. And I said, Mr. Trump, I said, I miss this. I grew up with people like that. You're talking to the people I grew up with. I said, I missed it. I said, how did you not miss it? How did you not miss it? He said, you have to understand, I'm in reality TV. And so I've gone into these neighborhoods to generate demand for the ratings for my show, and I've seen the anxiety. So I'm going to finish on this, okay? And then hopefully can we take a few questions? If that's cool?
Absolutely.
I'm going to finish on this. I priced my dad's wages. I showed the president-elect, then the candidate. My dad's 1976 wages priced in 2016 in real economic terms, down 26%. You can't live on Long Island in a middle-class house raising 3 kids in that situation. You got enormous pressure on you in a situation like that. And so he saw that, I did not. A month later, I'm with the Harvard Law School Leadership Council, right? I told you the story, I think I told you the story. I'm in the Trump, everything's named Trump, by the way, everything. This ballroom, the whole world's named Trump, okay? He's gonna name Air Force One Trump Force One at some point, but I'm in the Trump International, John George's restaurant upstairs. Some of you guys are from New York. There's a long table there. And a dean walks in, there's 25 of us, all from Harvard Law School, like hoity-toity, very self-important people. She walks in, she says, hey, I just got back from Great Britain. It was June 24th, it was a day after the Brexit. And she said, I met with everybody. I met with Cameron, I met with Osborne, I met with all these people from Harvard, all these lawyers. They said there was not going to be a Brexit. There was not going to be a Brexit. What do you guys think happened? And so I raised my hand, and I said, Dean, I mean this with all due respect, and I'm not saying this with any level of arrogance or talking like a pedant. I didn't see it, so it's not like I'm sitting here with you guys saying, hey, I know more than you guys, but I just have to ask, has anybody in this room been to a Donald Trump or a Bernie Sanders rally? And so the 25 people, not one person. And at that point, I went to 4 Trump rallies, and Corey Lewandowski, went to a Bernie Sanders rally, which was very similar to the Trump rallies. I said, listen, those are the people that voted for the Brexit. They live in Manchester, they live in Liverpool, they live in the upper Midlands of they're economically anxious, and they will vote to reject the current move towards the establishment and globalism. And the last point I'm going to make, and then hopefully we take questions. I'm watching the clock, so we'll make sure we're on time. But the last point I'm going to make is we're now moving from, hey, I'm pissed off, into the politics of vindication. So we're now moving to the point, I'm going to cut my nose off to hurt you. It's going to hurt me, but I'm going to hurt you. So let's talk about that. It's Amazon. We're going to drop 25,000 jobs into Long Island City at $150,000 apiece. We're going to create 75,000 more jobs and positive externalities for a blighted area of New York. It's going to be technical jobs. And we're going to have a technological renaissance for this area of New York, and it's going to lead to $27 billion of tax revenues for the state and city of New York. no, we're not going to do that. We're going to cut our noses off to spite our own faces, and we're going to punish Amazon, and we're going to tell these corporate fat cats to get out of our city. And so they evacuate from the city, and they left the place exactly where it was. And so if you think that it's going to get better, it's only going to get better if we can communicate better, and we can explain to people what are the right common sense policies and what are the bad policies, and we got to help these people because they're so pissed off that they'll cut their noses off. They'll listen to somebody like Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, and they'll block something like that, which could have transformed the entire city. All right, so anyway, can I take a few questions, Tom?
Yeah,
Is that all right?
we're right on the
I want to take 2 or 3
here.
questions. Is that cool?
Yes, sir. Hang on one second.
Yeah.
We're going to get you a mic. Thank you.
Can you talk about
Jim, good to see you, by the way.
Good to see you too, Anthony. Can you talk about his use of Twitter? And I mean, obviously, it was a very big part in getting elected and getting his message out, his ability to connect directly with voters. But obviously, there's been no slow up on his use of it. So just get your thoughts around how he uses Twitter. Are you in that camp of like, listen, I voted for the guy, but I really wish he would just put his Twitter account away for like a month?
Oh, come on. There's people in this room, right, Jim? Honestly, there's people in this room that like the guy but dislike the guy. You know what I'm trying? You know what I'm saying? They're like, what the hell are you doing now? You know what I mean? He's almost got like a goalpost moving personality. He's like, okay, I'm gonna give you phenomenal policies, but I'm gonna make you so batty, so crazy, to test your loyalty to me. You see what he's doing? And so it's like almost like a borderline personality that way, honestly, right? So the Twitter use, and I told this to people when I got the job in the comms department at the White House and when in the campaign. If the president is well fortified with media surrogates and advocates, and there are people out there defending him on television, radio, et cetera, he dials back the non-strategic Twitter use. If he's sitting there in the White House in his boxer shorts and his robe and he's flipping through the channels and he doesn't like what's going on, he takes out the phone, he starts covfeffing the phone, with the finger, and he starts attacking people, right? That is very, very bad for him, okay? Now, if you think he listens to anybody, you haven't been paying close enough attention over the last 3 years, okay? He doesn't listen to anybody. So if you want to move him on a Twitter feed, you got to show him the pulse. Okay, so when you call Rex Tillerson dumb as a rock on Twitter, it may feel good for the minute, but you have white suburban women that are looking at that. So wait a minute, I'm teaching my kids about anti-bullying, and we have the President of the United States calling the former Secretary of State dumb as a rock. So what happens is they reduce their likability and they're wanting to vote for him. He got 52% of the white woman's vote last time. His overall total right now, as of today, is 38%. Now, I still believe he will win re-election, and I'm not saying that as a partisan. I'm saying that as a capital allocator that has to allocate $12 billion, and I'm saying that as an objective observer of what's going on. But his Twitter use sucks. Okay, let's just play it very plain spoken. But what he would say is that I don't know what I'm talking about, and he's the president, and I'm not, and shush, 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 I'm the president, let me finish. That's how he talks, right? He would say that the media hates him so much that he needs the Twitter use to hop over the media. And if you look at his social media audience, he has 100+ million people. And so every time he hits the Twitter or Instagram, it's like the Super Bowl audience for him. Now, one of the fun things I used to watch him do, and he loves, my God, he loves, is we would be watching CNN on a plane, right? He hate watches CNN, right? You guys know that, right? You can't call Don Lemon the stupidest person on television if you're not watching him, right? So he's hate watching CNN. So what he likes to do is he'll start tweeting. He'll say, hey, watch this. He'll start tweeting. It goes off the satellite mechanism on the plane. It hits the satellite up in the sky. It goes down into CNN, and then, boom, breaking news, ladies and gentlemen. Trump's saying something batshit crazy, right? And there it is right? And he's so happy about that. You have no idea how happy he is. Do you believe this? I just did this. It hit the boom. And look, I got Anderson Cooper talking about this. You know what I mean? But you know why you guys are laughing so hard at that? Because you know how true that is. You know what I'm saying? So the short answer, and I'm sorry to be so long-winded, he's never changing that. He's never changing that. So we have to win despite that, right? So we have to work around that. But there's nobody in this room that raised their hand and said, well, some of those tweets you haven't winced at or just went, oh my God, right? The Mika facelift tweet, you remember that one? I was in the White House that day. I wasn't working for him at the time. But Mika said something about him on Morning Joe. He calls it Morning Psycho. He used to call it Morning Eating Crow. I mean, he's nuts about Morning Joe, right? So she says something about him. And then he says that, well, her facelift, the blood was dripping from her facelift on the rug in Mar-a-Lago. Okay, so it's very funny, okay? And it probably made him feel good at the moment. But now he's created a permanent enemy, a 3-hour enemy, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., on a cable network that gets 1 million-ish viewers. And they don't like bringing people on there that are pro-Trump. Do you see what I'm saying? That's where it hurts them. Sorry.
Other questions? Yes, sir. Hang on one sec. Okay, fire away.
Anthony, where do you go for your journalistic integrity these days?
Yeah, it's a good question.
And who do we listen to?
It's a really good question. So one of this, I won't tell you the guy's name because it's less important, but one of the station chiefs from the CIA, because I've traveled all over the world, with the military. Before I joined the administration, I was on the BENS board, the Business Executives for National Security. So I've been to Afghanistan, Iraq. I've been, the DMZ, been on our carriers and stuff. But one of the station chiefs that I got close to said that he reads the English version of the Le Monde. And that's the French paper. And after he told me that about 5 years ago, I downloaded it on my iPad. And I'm going to tell you why. Because the French don't care about our politics. They're self-important, and they don't really care about American politics. So when you read the French version of Le Monde, they go right down the middle, and they give you an objective, here's what happened. Here's Barr's situation, here's Pelosi's situation, here's what happened. There's no parsing, there's no analysis, it's just straight up the middle. Unfortunately, in this society now, you can't find that in the United States because we have an eyeball game going, and they've realized that they can galvanize and self-reinforce these confirmed biases in different areas. And so now we've really splintered the situation in the U.S.
Other questions?
Tom has a question.
Okay, yep. Repeat the question.
I mean, it completely sucked, Tom, okay? I'm telling you, it was like the worst thing that could happen, okay? I literally got ejected from the White House like an Austin Powers villain, okay? And then I was like thrown into like the fire, right? And by the way, I think I mentioned this to you last night at dinner. General Kelly fired me. And so when he left the White House, I called him. I said, General, our first conversation lasted 3 minutes. You did all the talking, I did all the packing. He's like, you're fired, right? So I was getting my stuff together. I said, but let's have a real conversation. Let's go to lunch. Okay, so I spent 3 hours with John Kelly, who is an American hero. He's a 4-star U.S. Marine. And to the best of his capability, given his personality versus the president's personality, did the best he could. And it was very therapeutic for me on a number of different levels. But here's what I would tell you about what happened to me. To tell you that it wasn't an unmitigated disaster for me would be a lie. I was tabloided, lit up on late night comedy. I was excoriated in the press. I made a mistake, let's face it, okay? Raise your hand in the room if you've never made a mistake. Okay, raise your hand in the room if you've never said a curse word. Anybody in the room never said a curse word? You guys are options traders. You ever say a curse word? Raise your hand. So what happened to me was there was a kid that I trusted from Oyster Bay. I lived in Port Washington. He was an Italian kid whose father knew my father for 50 years. They were friends and socialized together. And so I said something off color to him on the telephone. He recorded it and ran to CNN with it. And I said to the guy, I said, if you do that to me, I'm going to get fired. I said, why are you being so transactional? You could have had a great relationship with me. I could have got you on the plane with me and the president. You could have had a lot of exposure and access. No, he needed to get that story. He needed to burn me to get that story. I said, well, if you do that, I'm going to get fired. He did it. I got fired. So here's what I would say. Number one, I did something fireable. So I'm an accountable person. I told General Kelly this. I don't blame him for firing me or Trump wanting me to be fired for what happened. I mean, I think Trump had second thoughts later, but at that moment, there was a lot of tumult going on, and he wanted me fired. So I'm accountable for that. I own that. I tell young kids when I speak at colleges, own your mistakes. Okay, you're going to make them, own your mistakes. But the second thing you have to do when you make a mistake that colossal is forgive yourself. You know, Jerry Falwell Jr. invited me to the Liberty University. He's got 15,000 kids on a Thursday as a convocation. So all 15,000 kids, Bobby, go to this basketball stadium and they talk. And you know, the evangelicals don't like cursing. I don't know if you guys know that, okay? Like, Pence doesn't curse, which I find, like, hard to believe, but, you know, he would probably be the one guy that could raise his hand and say he's never said a curse word, you know? He may have said poo once or something like that, you know what I mean? That's probably close, right? So now, I'm there with all the evangelicals. I said, look, if you're Christian or Judeo-Christian, you're taught about forgiveness and redemption. The number one thing you got to do when you make a mistake is forgive yourself. You know, we're taught to forgive others, but trust me, you also have to have a great relationship with yourself. And so for me, I told those kids, I'm not going to have a millstone of regret every single day. Oh, geez, I did something stupid. It got me fired from the White House. Let me kick myself tonight or tomorrow morning. But here's the other thing that I would say, which I really hope that you're listening to. When you put your pride and ego into something, it is an ultimate unmitigated disaster, okay? And so for me, any time in my life where I put my pride and ego into something, it has cost me. In that situation, I almost got divorced. I had my pride and ego up. I had my pride and ego up as it related to Priebus and Bannon. I've got some fun stories there. You guys don't have enough time for them. But what I would say to you, once your pride and ego are up, your emotions are going up, and your intelligence is going down, ladies and gentlemen. And so you guys are running businesses, you're trading, you're investors. Get it in check. I did not have it in check, Tom. Okay, when Priebus made the move on me to hurt me and my family, I made the move on him. And it cost me, it cost him, and I should have thought about it differently, and I should have been more strategic. So I have to own that as well. So the last thing I would say, though, is that, and I told Trump this, you know, Trump's never the guy that fires you, right? You guys know that, right? I mean, he's got the bicycle outside, you're fired, but he never fires anybody, really, right? So he had Kelly fire me on Monday. Thursday, he calls me, and he wants to know if I'm okay, right? And I'm like, yeah, I'm totally okay. I said, relax. I said, you made me as famous as Melania and Ivanka. I didn't have to sleep with you or be your daughter, so I'm totally fine. I'm going to be fine, you know? And so that's the last point of it, okay? Like, he did raise my profile. Like, they accidentally raised my profile, and now they've given me standing. And so what's weird is I'm two-dimensionalized some ways because of what happened. But then when I start meeting people, I start talking to people, or I'm on television, they say, okay, wait a minute, the guy's actually studied the issues. He actually understands the situation. So that's been beneficial. But to be honest with you, it was brutal. Brutal. I mean, you know, you make the best of it in life, right? What are you going to do?
Other questions? Well, let me toss one out. Let's look forward. We're 18 months away, and there are 18 to 20 candidates from the Democratic Party that are looking for the nomination. If it were 20 months from today, who do you think the Democratic nominee would be and why?
So, you know, don't go by what I'm thinking. Let's talk about what the president's thinking. The president thinks it's going to be Joe Biden. Okay. Now, if you talk to the Democrats, they say, no, it won't be Joe Biden because, you know, I said to Jesse Waters on Fox one night, they said, Joe is, he's male, he's pale, and he's stale. Okay, so if you're male, pale, and stale, with the lunatics in the Democratic Party, you're probably not going to get there, okay? So, but Trump thinks he's running against Biden, okay? And so, and if he's running against Biden, I think Kamala Harris would be his pick. I think that's a pretty good blended ticket on a number of different levels. And then I think Vice President Biden would have a hard time with Trump. Even though the polls are where they are right now, he hasn't gotten onto the debate stage with Trump. Okay, and so what happens to you is Trump is doing things to you that you're not, you know, let me put it to you this way. The definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different outcome. And Biden is a conventional politician, and so are those 18 other politicians. So let me show you what they do, right? Ready? Watch me. See this? So what they do is they comport themselves and they talk in a way where they don't want to offend anybody, and they spend 40 years doing that. Does Trump do that? No, Trump is the Ronnie Lott of verbal contact, right? He's going to knock the person off the stage. You follow what I'm saying? And they're in there, and they're trying to act gentlemanly or statesman, womanly or manly, and he don't care. He's orange bowling for dollars, right? So let me, you know that, right? So let me tell you something that I've watched, and you're going to remember this, okay, as you go into the debates. Trump has a weapon in his arsenal that I call the Trump Twitter insect light. Okay, so let me explain this thing to you. Ready? It looks like the Twitter logo. It's glowing blue. And if you're his adversary, he comes over to your house and he hangs it on your porch. And now what does that light do? It shoots moonbeams into the house while you're trying to live your life, right? You're at the TV, it's shooting a moonbeam into your house. You're Elizabeth Warren, remember her? She was popping the beer in front of the Instagram. She's going like this. The moonbeam's going into her head, right? Now what happens with this moonbeam is it has a time-release bomb on the moonbeam, Bobby. And it goes off at a point where Trump wants it to go off. And so what happens to the person is they end up doing exactly what Trump wants them to do, even though they shouldn't be doing it. So let's talk about this. Ready? About 7 weeks ago, I'm on the phone with the president. He says, what do you think of Poe entering the race? I'm like, who's Poe? Pocahontas. She's not Native American enough to use the whole word now. We're going to go with Poe, right? I said, you're not going to do that, are you? I mean, you're not going to do that, right? Oh, no, I'm not going to do that. She's dead. She's dead. So now let me explain this to you. He's shooting moonbeams into her brain. Pocahontas. I've got more Native American in me, and I don't have any Native American in me, Pocahontas. And so she is going to go take this DNA test, right? Now, you probably didn't read that New York Times article, but there were 8 people on her staff told her not to take the DNA test. But they didn't understand the Trump Twitter insect light, right? The moonbeam went into the brain, the bomb went off, and she couldn't help herself. She ran out and got the DNA test. You can't make this stuff up. She's 1,024th Cherokee. Can you believe it? She's proud of it. She goes to a podium like that, says, I'm 1,024th Cherokee, and the Cherokee Nation says, you're not ours, okay? You are not ours. Okay, so now she's got to apologize to the Cherokee Nation for what she did, right?
Right.
And they find out that in 1986, she told a little bit of a fib on her Texas bar application. Anybody see that in the news? It said Native American on there. She's dead. Now, let me explain why she's dead. Because when you are a conventional politician, you are trying to speak with great morality and righteousness and sanctimony, right? That's what you're doing. So one nick in Trump world, that is not even a paper cut. But one nick will knock you off the podium. Let's talk about Trump for a second, right? We know that Trump had a stormy, but you know he had a partly cloudy, a mostly sunny, a very sunny. He's had the entire weather pattern of women, right? Does everybody know that? Right? Everybody knows that, right? So on the barcode for Trump, it says, you're going to purchase this, but he's a very flawed guy, but he's lived a very full life. So if he's got something wrong with his taxes, or he's got 10 girlfriends, or it's all built into it. You see that? You see how tough it is going to be to beat him? Because what are you going to say? Well, I did opposition research on him, and there's something bad in the tax code or taxes. No one cares. Do you see what I mean? So to me, if the economy is strong, which it seems likely that that's possible, if you look at the strength of where we are today, and it's only 18 or 19 months later, I think he wins re-election. And that is, again, not a partisan thing. If you tell me, hey, look, the economy is very, very weak, or there's a colossal national security disaster somewhere, and there's somebody that the American people view as competent, they may change jockeys on the economy and the geopolitical situation, but unlikely.
Okay. Well, I think we've pretty much gotten our time here, so I wanted
Thank
to
you,
say
guys.
thank you to
I appreciate
all of
the
you
opportunity.
again.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. It was great.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
Anthony, awesome. Thank you, sir.
The preceding program was a production of the Options Insider Radio Network. For more quality options programs, visit www.theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app, available in iTunes and on Google Play. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions@theoptionsinsider.com.